Greetings, all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. Today, we're going to have an interesting conversation here. And maybe I should ask you to take a deep breath before we get started. Set yourself up. I've got Jesse Coomer, who's the author of A Practical Guide to Breathwork, and retired Chief of Police Jared McKee from Plainfield, Indiana. And Jared and I go way back. Jesse, I just met as we got into this conversation. But today we're going to talk about breathwork and why it's important for cops, why we think it can help you. But I'll let the expert explain why. So, Jared, Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right, Jesse, how does an English professor become a breathwork teacher and author?
Yes, so I am a recovering English professor. I did 11 hard years. No, I think the big thing for me is I was dealing with stress, anxiety. I think like a lot of people can relate to that. And I started trying to do the things that I've heard were good. You exercise, you try to eat right, and I tried to just do more things that would be for my own, I guess, my mental health. And I heard that there was this meditation thing that was supposed to be good for you, and I was like, I don't know. I'm a Christian boy from the Midwest. What's with all this stuff? And but I started trying to do things to help kind of clear my mind and get some more, maybe try to be a little bit more relaxed. And that's whenever I came across breath work and breathing techniques. And I said, okay, so you're telling me that the way that I breathe somehow can affect the way that I feel and how my thoughts work and how well I can focus, how well I can sleep at night. And whether I like it or not, I'm doing it anyway. and so I dug down the rabbit hole. And, I know as soon as someone hears that I'm an English professor, it's there's some judgments, and I get that. My field,
like I told you on our pre-call, I was an English minor in school. So I went from the military to college, and I was at Purdue, and I was an English minor. Now my emphasis was on creative writing, so it did help me. It did help me later on in my report writing days, but not in the creative sense.
Yeah. Well, there's you really dropped them in the scene. It's like so descriptive, and they felt like they were really there whenever they read your reports. So my focus was research and rhetoric. So what that is basically it's exactly what you want to do when you love to nerd out on things, and that is what I taught people to do. If you took my classes in the university, it would be, okay, we're going to learn how to do quality research. We're going to learn how to put these things together and synthesize different pieces of research to come up with a theory, and how to prove your theories with quality research. We're going to then try to make it into some kind of a easier to understand package thing. So we need to be able to take all this disparate information, all this research, and make it so that it's understandable to your audience. And so when I found out about this breathing stuff, I started doing it, and it worked. And it was something that was really having a profound effect on me. And I kept on, I was like, well, I know how to do research. That's something I'm very good at. So I'm going to continue to do more research. And of course, I became my own first client of breath coaching. And this is something that, as I went forward, I would take all these certifications, anything that I could find to look into. Okay, so there's this technique. Oh, they say this one's the better one. Okay, let's get into that one. And I got into training people in ice baths and doing all kinds of other things as well. So I really nerded out on how the nervous system works. because nobody really told me about this. In school, we understand, okay, you got the nervous system, and then there's the brain stem, and then it connects to this part and that part. But how it really interacts in every day, and how it plays a role in our emotional state and in our physiological state, how it plays a role in our decision making, even whenever we're not really aware, I had no idea. And so I don't think most people fully understood this or understand this right now, even. So I
Oh man,
kept on.
well, and I'll just
Yeah.
pause you right there for a
Yeah.
second, because that's precisely why this is so important for our audience, right?
Right.
Coptimizer, cop optimization. And then maybe you haven't heard me say this before, but the other one I like is, and maybe I should have trademarked this, but is POPO, right? Police officer performance optimization. So,
I was gonna say, I think I've heard Popo before, but I'm not.
yeah, so we could probably come up with a couple of different ways to build on that. But
I like it.
so yeah, before we get down that path, though, I think this is a perfect segue to bring Jared into the conversation,
Yeah.
because now we've got an English teacher that's like figuring out, man, the way I breathe is impacting my physiology. It's helping me, and then like what everyone does, right? Like we first have this stage of curiosity where we're learning about something, and then we start doing it. And then what's the next evolution is then you want to teach it. And I can say this as a CrossFit affiliate owner, and for a long time, it's like, how do you know someone's doing CrossFit, right? Because that's all they talk about. And then I have found the same thing to be true in some of these things like meditation and the ice baths. Definitely want to come back to that, right? Because that's taken the world by storm here for in the last year. And I think there's a few of us that have been dabbling in that in a while as well. But I definitely want to come back to that. But Jarrett, what's going on, man?
Yeah, just living the dream, and glad to be here to share such an important topic, right, with all the officers that are listening, because we are in this strange world right now of officers looking for ways to make life better in this, crazy scenarios that they're in every day. And just a little bit of background on me is, I'm a Indiana born and raised country boy that after high school went and joined the Marines and did infantry. And I wanted to do all the hard things in life, right? And went to the reserves and did worked in the jail, ended up in law enforcement here in Plainfield, Indiana, and just putting my heart and soul into law enforcement, doing the SWAT thing, all of those things. Did a combat deployment with our unit in 2004 to Iraq, came back and got into triathlons and I've always been that person that lifting and running and just trying to stay fit, and not just for the looks of it was because of the job. I landed myself in administration as the patrol captain, and that begins to change your world a little bit, right? Because instead of sitting like this all day, now you're just sitting at a desk typing away at your computer. And so I
changes the type of stress too, right? Because captains in administration, they don't understand what it's like out on the street. They forget, and there's no stress there.
Right. And the thing that I found quickly was
that's my sarcasm. I'm sorry.
it never goes away. I mean, when you marked 10:42 at the end of the day and went home, unless I got a page, for those of younger generation, that was a little thing you kept on your belt that beeped in the middle of the night, right? Unless you got a call in the middle of the night because you're getting called out for the SWAT team, your day was done. And I didn't worry about the job, where in administration, the work never goes away. It's 24/7. And so I started to feel the stress a little bit. Eventually I go to the doctor, and I've been following what you had been doing in the world of health and wellness and law enforcement. And my doctor, I just become the chief when I had this conversation with the doctor, and the doctor looks at me and she goes, "Is your job that stressful?" And I just laughed and I said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, "Well, and you use this word, right? It's you're skinny fat." And she said, "I don't know what's going on with your body, but your body hates you right now. And you either need to go on all of this medication, or you need to fix something. You need to fix something, quit your job, or do something." And I'm like, "But I'm doing the thing." And so I went down the rabbit hole of intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet and all of those things, and saw some great progress in that, right? Because we like to run into the gas station and grab a Snickers bar and a energy drink at 2 a.m. and think that that's a good nutrition. So that made some steps, but there was just something missing. And so as most of us do, just start researching. And so I see this breath work, cold bath, cold shower stuff. And so I go to my money manager, my wife, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to do some stuff, and it's probably going to be a little weird, but I just need you to bear with me." Paid for, every online course I could find and all of that. And what I found was I was starting to make improvements, but I also found that the other side of the law enforcement community, there's some weird stuff out there.
Yeah.
And I just started to get a little concerned, right? Is this changing my theology? Is this changing my morals and my values? Because there's some strange stuff, especially in meditation and that modality, if you really go down the rabbit hole. And so I run across the Midwest Method and Jesse Coomer on YouTube. And so I'm watching his stuff. I read his book. I'm like, this guy's a little different. Right?
Guilty.
He's from Indiana, so guilty as charged. But I connected with him in a way of, tell me the science and how the science is going to work. And so for those out there listening that say, "Man, I can never connect with these people," I just went on a limb and I emailed Jesse Coomer and said, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And I want to know more. And I think this would be great for law enforcement. What do you think?" And he emailed me back. And that began the long process of where we're at today, of really, and we'll get into this, but the tier 1, tier 2 community of special forces do a phenomenal job at being the tip of the spear in everything. And they've been doing this stuff for a while, right? And law enforcement, as much as we want to have the tech gear that reflects those teams, we don't want to do maybe the harder things that reflects what they're doing. And so we brought it in and we just started working with police officers, specifically in breathwork and what it could do and how it could change their lives dramatically, right? And so it's changed my life. My wife goes out and talks with me to groups, and she will tell people, "This saved my husband's life," and it really has, because my stress level is it's still there, right? So I'm a retired police officer, but now I'm a public safety director. So instead of just dealing with coppers, now I got to deal with coppers, firefighters, and dispatchers. So I don't know which one was worse, because they all get along so well. But just learning now,
they do when it comes for bargaining time.
Oh yes. It's everybody's trying to take money out of the same pot, so it's fun.
Well, I want to go back just real quick and follow up on one of the things. You go to your doctor, and I assume she's looking at your labs and what you're talking about. And we've covered this on a few episodes, but I'm really going to dive into that in this season 2, with several different some of my physician friends and others that I've worked with over the years. So what Jared's talking about, we do this testing, and we have a couple of different labs, but there's a very specific test that we call it the police panel, and this really started from a program out in Reno, Nevada. Chief Steve Pitts, he's retired now for a while, working with Dr. Jim Greenwald there, and trying to understand why the cops in Reno were so unhealthy and why they were having heart attacks at such high rates. It was really a project that was born around understanding cost, like your occupational care costs for a police department and municipality, but then also for that you just had a chief that cared about, man, I don't want my people having heart attacks. I want them to be healthy and be fit. It's the first and foremost, it's a passion play for your people, but there are also some practical, benefits from a performance perspective, from a cost perspective. So, yeah, we've presented this program now at IACP Wellness Symposium. We've presented at the National FOP, and we call it the blood doesn't lie, because, and the reason I finally settled on that name was like, you can convince yourself of a lot of things, right? And we'll get to that, right, Jesse? You can convince yourself of a lot of things, whether you think you're healthy or not healthy, or everything's going to be okay, or it's not going to be okay. But when you look at your labs, right? Maybe Jared, I'll just ask you this, right? When you look at your labs and and luckily you had a doctor that just flat out called you out on it, like, hey, something's wrong here. What's going on? And apparently sharp enough to recognize like what was happening, because, and I'll be honest, like a lot of physicians, you go get your labs done, and if you're in these certain parameters, most aren't going to ask you, they're not going to tell you what insulin resistance is, but we know that through our testing that we're finding 70 to 80% of police officers in America are insulin resistant, and they don't know it. It's undiagnosed. They don't know about lipase small a. They don't know that a resting blood glucose level of 100, over 100 is, it's you're on your way to insulin resistance. They don't understand, I mean, the doctors understand that, but the cops don't necessarily understand like what that progression is. So we work on this 10-year risk. So how does breath work tie into that? And the one thing that I think we come from this at different angles. Like I came from the fitness side of the things and then nutrition side of things. And I was probably late to the party when it came to meditation, breath work, ice baths, and how those things can impact recovery and physiology. So I'll leave it at that for there, because this is kind of where I wanted to go. Like the science is pretty clear, but before we bore people on the science, I think I mean, it doesn't bore me. I geek out on stuff like this, but I think the why, like why. I mean, you can. I've talked about this in the past too. You can see my meditation chair in my office. Why are cops resistant? It's not just cops, right? But generally cops tend to be type A's, very closed off, very suspicious of others, suspicious of others outside of law enforcement. And I do think we're getting better at that. But there's another thing that breathwork can actually help, right? And actually fix. It's like we're just, resetting ourselves.
I think the biggest resistance I find with not just in the first responder community, but within just in general, is the thought that, okay, so I'm supposed to sit here cross-legged, and I don't know, just think about Mountain Springs or something like that. I've got things to do, man. I'm busy. I got to do these things. I've got to perform. I'm not interested in listening to yoga music or having yoga shorts or even doing yoga, right? Because there's this assumption that you have to do yoga whenever you're doing these things. I think the biggest resistance is a misunderstanding of what it is. And sadly enough, it's because it's been presented by, the guy singing Kumbaya. I get that all the time, by the way. Everyone's saying, it's just, I'm going to go to this training. Is it a bunch of Kumbaya stuff? And it's like, no, I promise we will not be singing Kumbaya. I think the biggest thing is not understanding that your nervous system is in charge of everything. So when we talk about blood panels, I did a test. I have these companies that reach out to me and they want me to try out their products and things. And I tried the contiguous blood glucose monitor.
Yeah, CGMs. Yep.
Yeah. And I did this during the holidays. And of course, the joke was, hey, mom's pumpkin
That's
pie is
probably
going
not
to.
a good time. Well, maybe it is a
Exactly.
good time to do it.
It was really interesting because also during that time, we had some unexpected, stressful things happen. And it was those stressful things, not mom's pumpkin pie, that actually had the highest spike in blood glucose. It was so educational. And this is when we talk about insulin resistance. And the thing is, insulin resistance is a huge problem across the board. It's not just, and of course, people just link it to obesity and being skinny fat. But when you have high levels of insulin on a chronically high, just daily level, your risk of heart attack, high blood pressure goes up. Insulin is also something that causes more cells to replicate. When we increase cell replication, we increase the risk of cancer. The more chances you have to make that zombie cell. So I think the biggest reason why we have resistance is a lack of understanding of what it is. Is this thing. I like deadlift. I like, hey, guess what? I do too, right? I don't want to go out and do this, go out into the meadow and whatever. I've got a real, life, and I've got to focus. Okay. So yes, that's a misunderstanding. We think that it's doing something way out of the ordinary. And then we also don't understand that your nervous system, I don't care how good you're eating. I don't care how much exercise you do. I don't care what it is you're doing in everyday life for your health. Your nervous system is in charge of all of that. And how we regulate our nervous system, that is what breath does. And so when Jared and I started working together, we put together a protocol, multiple protocols to do just that. Okay, we want to make sure that a person understands these are the scientific things that we know, because breath science is actually older than germ theory. So this is the thing. We've actually had more scientific research on how breathing influences our nervous system than we've had in germ theory. So we it's crazy. People were still doing surgery without washing their hands.
Yeah.
But we already knew that the way we breathe influences our nervous system at that point. And we have had an enormous amount of data to back it up. So when people see a lot of times, okay, it's about breathing, they think, well, I remember the guy that said, take a deep breath. Okay, that doesn't do much, right? And of course, generally, they don't really know how to take a deep breath. And we work with breath mechanics. We work with how the muscles should fire together. If you're in the world of CrossFit, of course, mobility is key. And the same mobility dysfunctions that we see with just average everyday life, and especially if you're sitting in a squad car or or sitting at a desk or sitting just in general, you're seeing a lot of mobility issues. You also see issues when it comes to breathing mechanics. And so I think the big thing is what we see so often is a misunderstanding. Whenever they finish our seminars, right? When they come to our retreats and they're leaving, they're like, oh, that was totally different than I thought it was going to be. I totally didn't expect that. Wouldn't you say that, Jared?
Yeah, and I think the biggest issues that we see is as you know, Pat, right? We train our officers day one, hour one. Everyone's trying to kill you. You have to be on the alert. You sit with your facing the door, right? You always are on alert. You're always watching. You should carry a gun 24/7. I mean, I had people asking me, how do you carry your gun when you do triathlons? I don't, right? It's okay. But we have such a community, as they should be, on the alert. But the alert is fight or flight. And officers are okay with that of, yes, I am here to fight, right? I'm not going to flight, but I'm that mindset of fight or flight means I'm always ready. And so when you tell them we're going to meditate or we're going to just breathe, then they think they're letting their guard down. And so that has been key to this of we are talking about stay and play, which means I'm ready for anything to happen, but I'm not already right. I'm not redlining yet. I shouldn't redline. I should be down here ready for whatever it is to happen. And if I have to redline, I know how to bring myself back down very, very quickly. And that's where, right, who gets made fun of the most, right? It's the one that gets in the vehicle pursuit that is screaming and yelling like a kindergartner getting chased on the playground, right? That's that stay and play. We can't get to that point. And so it's funny, but the first time we did this, and we had officers, lay down and actually go into a deep breath session because we wanted them for the first time ever to actually understand what it's like to down regulate all the way you should be right before you walk into your house after a bad day, the way you should be before you go to sleep. And I had to tell them, listen, I need you to turn your radios off. I need you to close your eyes and you're okay. I'm here. I've got the gun. I've got the radio. You're safe, right? Because we don't like to do that. The only place that we feel safe is in our home. And that by the time we get inside that door, it still takes us, right? You read Gil Martin, how we're on that roller coaster back and forth. And so just helping them understand that is the main thing. If we're not trying to make you into someone that's soft and can't go out and do what needs to be done, we're trying to make you a better officer all the way around that's always ready, but healthy.
Yeah. And, that's interesting because it's not just, and this is maybe the curse for the younger modern officer. Like they're having to deal with stuff that we never had to worry about. Like it was bad enough getting in your squad car. You had a mobile radio on your hip or in your dash and a portable radio on your hip, and you had a couple channels, and you just had to pay attention to that and what was going on around you. But now you sit in a squad car and you've got dash cameras, you've got radars, you have your laptop that's running multiple software platforms, you have your cell phone, you have your body camera. You're just inundated with all this different technology and everything surrounding you. And it's all of these things are trying to pull at your attention. Like they're all pulling you in one way or another. Whether if your phone is in your pocket or sitting on the dash and you've got the Facebook and Twitter app and a few other things up on the phone. I mean, ding, ding, or this, the haptic vibration. Your mind is just going everywhere. And I'm hoping to get a few people on this season as well. I've got a few people lined up for later in the year, but that's something I want to talk about as well. Just like the whole concept. I don't know if you've read Harari's work, but just there's a few others who were just talking about distraction. I will go back. Like, so here's one thing that I think will resonate with cops across the board, right? Dave Grossman, he wrote On Killing and On Combat. I think just about every cop at some point has heard of him, have seen him, have been to presentations that he's done. We hosted him at our agency years ago. But he talks about the condition black, right? When you go into a high stress and you have a high stress thing happen, and he talks about this for combat veterans, cops, others, where your vision begins to narrow. You have auditory and visual exclusion is what it's called. Heart rate is accelerating, and that's extreme tunnel vision. And then afterwards, people don't remember hearing gunshots. They have very poor recall about what happened. Well, this is like an intense response to stress. And what Jesse, you're teaching and talking about is precisely what can help you mitigate because that's not necessarily a bad thing when that happens, right? You need a level of excitement to increase your speed, your thinking, your strength. But to be able to do it and control it under stress that's a different story.
Yeah, and on that book, right? I don't know how many conferences I've gone to and listened to officers that survived traumatic events, right? Got shot 4 or 5 times, and every one of them said, I'm laying there, I know I'm bleeding out, and all I can remember is Grossman saying combat breathing. And they're trying to go back in their mind as they're laying there thinking they're going to die of, how do I do that? It's box breathing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't train that, just like anything else, how do we unholster? How do we holster? How do we change mags? How do we do all of these things? And we do it enough, it's not going to matter then when you're laying there with the gunshot wound trying to bring your nervous system back down, right? I mean, those are, and that's why I keep trying to tell people of, you need to know this stuff instantaneously. Oop, I'm here, I need to do this, instead of, what was that crap I read in Grossman's book 10 years ago, right? And you're as you're laying there ruminating about what just happened to you, trying to go to back and remember that.
And I want to unpack that just a little bit when it comes to condition black, when it comes to what that really is, these tunnel visions, all these things. This is actually something that is hardwired into the human organism. So our brains, our whole physiology is actually built specifically to do that on purpose. And the reason for that is the vast majority of human history, to solve any problem, there was a physical solution. It wasn't that you needed to think critically. It's just that you needed to react quickly. So what happens is that your prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain that is responsible for critical thinking, self-regulation, even willpower, it actually will shut down. And that's a thing. I don't care who you are, how experienced you are. It is shown in study after study after study after study in every field that under acute stress, okay, so under direct stress in the moment, the prefrontal cortex will start to shut down very quickly. It's very, very fast. And the reason for that is because the vast majority of human history, it wasn't a matter of critical thinking that was going to get you out of the situation, right? The saber-toothed tiger or the bear or whatever is attacking you, I don't need to do long division. I need to utilize my emotional centers. I need to utilize these things. I can't really stop and think. And if I do, I will die. So it is a natural response to not think critically so that you can react and respond. And what happens is the parts of our brains that will activate. So we have the brainstem and the limbic system. These are responsible. Generally, that's where we have our emotions. That's where we have our survival instincts. They're not concerned about critical thinking. You just can't do that in those parts of your brain. And so the vast majority of human history, that helped us survive. So that's why we are where we are today. Now, fast forward to the modern day, and especially in instances of first responders, right? We say, okay, we want you to go into these terrible situations. And we also want you to think critically. So it is something that is a completely not a natural thing. And we want you to do that. And that's going to be your daily life for your entire career. And so what we see is that, of course, the more you have in training, generally you can fall back on your training. That's great. But when we get into these stress states, and there's no amount of training that will undo what we are as a human organism, we always see this. We have this state of fight or flight. We don't call it fight, flight, and think critically, right? But we expect a person to go into a life or death situation on a daily basis, possibly, and be the adult in the room, right? Not only are you responsible for your own safety, but you're responsible for everyone else's safety there as well. We're going to want you to think critically. We want you to behave according to certain codes, and we're filming you, and we're going to armchair quarterback later, right? And so what we do is we offer officers the opportunity to say, okay, your nervous system is set. This is how it works. But we do have a mechanism that allows you to upregulate and downregulate. We have a gas pedal and a brake that we can start to teach you. And it's something that is already happening. So whether you know it or not, it's already in play. We just teach you how to work with it. And so for the vast majority of human history, we didn't have to learn how to regulate our nervous system because the situation did that for you. And if you go into a situation nowadays knowing what we know now, knowing that nervous system regulation is a real thing that you can learn, and it's not hard. And I mean, I shouldn't say it's not hard. I should say that the concepts are simple. You do have to practice it regularly to make it something that will genuinely work. But if you do that, you're going into a situation and you're just depending on hopefully kind of luck in many ways. Hopefully my nervous system doesn't, mess me up. Hopefully my brain, my prefrontal cortex doesn't shut down so much that I can't think. I'm just going to go in and hope for the best, as opposed to using the tools that are available. So when we train officers, and this is something now we're doing it at the Indianapolis Metro Police Academy, we're doing it in a lot of different areas. We say, okay, here is how this works. This is your nervous system. This is literally how it works, and it's never not going to work this way. And here is how breathing can interface with that. And it's the interesting thing about being a human being is that we have the capacity to regulate our breathing. So we can decide to hold a breath. We can decide how long to inhale and how long to exhale. Other species don't have. So we're very, very special on this planet. Other species do not have that capacity to do that. We do. And it's because we have that capacity that we can tap into and regulate the nervous system like we can. And this is why breath work works. And so what we do is we say, okay, here is what your nervous system expects when you breathe. Here is how dysfunctional breathing influences the way you are experiencing life. Here are ways to downregulate and sometimes upregulate. Sometimes you need to charge. You need that extra energy. That's okay. But we're going to teach you how to use the gas pedal and how to use the brake so that whenever you're in those instances, you can do it, and you're not just going in there hoping, well, I hope I don't freak out. I hope for the best.
All right, so let's walk through this, right? Let's just start right at the beginning, because even the foreword in your book is written by I don't know him, but obviously
Casper
you
van
do.
der Meulen. Yeah.
And I thought that generally I skip past the forewords, or I just I just read them a little bit, but the way he started that pulled me in right away, like every single breath.
Right.
And where he went from there, it wasn't just he took a different direction, and it was the next line is determines the level of metabolism in your mitochondria.
Yep.
And so he goes from kind of like this emotional lead to then right into a very scientific, follow-up. Like, and so it's going to ask you, so people are going to be like, well, what does that even mean? Like,
sure,
my metabolism, my mitochondria. So, do you want to just touch on that real quick? Like and because most people aren't going to know what ATP is, and
sure.
we can kind of walk through that, but I think it's important for people to understand. I think cops, for the most part, understand the dog brain, right? We talk a lot about that. When your prefrontal cortex shuts down, your amygdala takes over. You have Grossman and others have called that, right, the prefrontal cortex hijack. There's been some different expressions, like the dog brain. And
sure.
I talk to my kids about that all the time, right? Who's thinking for you right now? Is it you or the dog that's in your head, right? And so, that's a whole nother conversation about video games. But
oh yeah, well.
So what happens when you breathe? What's going on?
So here's how this works. So there's one of the simplest ways to break it down is just I'll briefly go into what we call the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system has three major branches. There's two that we can influence in a direct way through breathing. And one is called the sympathetic nervous system. The other is called the parasympathetic nervous system. There will not be a quiz after the podcast, my friends. But just so you know, these two sides of the nervous system. One is, sometimes we call it the fight or flight side, and sometimes we call the other, so some sympathetic, sometimes we call that fight or flight. It's really a better way to look at it is activity, right? So your nervous system is basically, if you go back to our foundational biology, our species, every cell in your body knows that your game plan is action. So everything, all 37.2 trillion cells that make up the human body, they're all working together to help you to get into the right state to take the action that your nervous system believes you need to take. Okay. So, and this will be influenced by all the signals that you're receiving, all the different things you're thinking about. And that's going to inform your nervous system. Do I need to be in an active state or do I need to be in a relaxed state? So there's certain things that can happen in an active state. There's certain things that can happen in a relaxed state. Now, in an active state, we need more blood sugar, right? So in an active state, so we might call this the sympathetic side of your autonomic nervous system. You're going to actually have, it's really amazing. Sometimes we compare the human body to a machine, and it really does the human body a disservice to do that, because no machine can do what our bodies can do. Our entire physiology changes based off of what the nervous system believes you need to do in that moment. So when it believes we need to take physical action, it's either physical action or physical relaxation. It's pretty simple when it comes to that. And it's going to influence the amount of blood flow to parts of your brain. It's going to influence the sensitivity of all of your senses. So your vision will become more sharp whenever your nervous system believes you need to take action. Your skin becomes more sensitive. You can smell more fine-tuned. Your hearing becomes more fine-tuned in those moments. You will notice that your breathing actually will increase naturally. And anytime you've ever been, scared or freaked out or afraid or just, activated, that naturally, hey, okay, I didn't do this on purpose, but now I'm breathing faster. This is because your nervous system knows that you need more oxygen to produce more cellular energy, like you said, ATP. It naturally knows that. You don't have to think about it. That part of your nervous system is like, okay, we need these things. So it changes the way that your entire physiology will express itself. It's going to shut down your entire digestive system. So when you're in a stress state, I don't care how nutritious you're eating, you really won't be able to digest that nutrition. And this is something that people come to me all the time and say, hey, I changed my diet and I still have acid reflux. I still have gas all the time. I still have all these issues. Okay, so let's talk about what's happened right before you eat. Well, I'm in this stress state. So your nervous system will shut down your reproductive organs during those stress times, because those are systems within you that your nervous system says, okay, we don't need these right now. It's about life or death. So it shifts all that blood, all that energy to your skeletal muscles. That's when we get the pump, right? That's when we get the adrenaline. So adrenaline, cortisol, all these stress hormones often feel good as well. So we get addicted to feeling this certain way and if we don't get all these stress hormones, we're like, something's weird. Okay. So that's after chronic, being in these stress states. But okay, so we get all this, we get stress hormones, we get dopamine. Dopamine is a neurochemical. It's a reward chemical, and it's commonly misunderstood. A lot of people think it's what we get for looking at our phone or whatever. It's actually a neurochemical that makes you feel like seeking out, exploring, doing things. So your entire physiology changes based off of the situation your nervous system believes you to be in. Your nervous system doesn't understand time. So if you're worried about something, if you're thinking about something, it assumes that is what is in front of you at this point. And this is where a lot of mindfulness practices try to help you to clear your mind, right? Now, here's the thing. If you're living in the modern world, it's very difficult to clear your mind. And if you're on the job, well, I don't want you to just sit around with nothing on your mind. You need to be able to be focused on doing these things. So we need to understand that active state has different levels. So it's great to be, like Jared was saying, what we try to help officers do is come into a state of stay and play. And what that is, sometimes we might call that being more in a state of flow, or a state sometimes in athletics, we would call it the zone, so that we feel good. We're not too, jittery. We're not nervous. We have energy, and we also have that basically access to all of our faculties. It's when we don't have the ability to regulate that we get into the state of fight or flight. And when you're in that state of fight or flight, you really have very little ability to think. And so it's literally either I'm going to run away or I'm going to charge and attack. If you are so dysregulated that that's where you're pretty much there most of the time, and then something actually bad happens or stressful happens, you can go to the next level, and that would be freeze. So one of the weird things that we have as a species is this defense mechanism where we just literally freeze. I couldn't think, I don't know why I was just sitting there. I was just frozen. That's the next level after fight or flight. So all of these things, when we're in these states, it's not just a psychological state. So oftentimes we disconnect the brain from the body. It's all connected. And so when you're in these states, all of these things change. Now, a lot of people don't realize how often they are in a stressed state. So that sympathetic state. So they'll walk around with their digestive organs not working, reproductive organs not working. So all of those sex hormones that are really important for recovery and for health, they're not working because the nervous system believes, hey man, we're in a dangerous place. This is not the time to reproduce. Put it away. All right. So it's saying, okay, let's keep all of that stuff dormant because we can't eat right now. We need to run. We need to fight. We need high blood sugar. So the nervous system understands that your mitochondria, so every cell that we have in our bodies has a mitochondria. And this is a very simplified review of biology class, everybody. But you remember, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? And it takes the glucose that suddenly now you've released glucose from your liver, and it takes that extra oxygen from you breathing hard. Your heart rate's up, so that's circulating these things, and it goes into your mitochondria. It produces more energy. Well, here's the thing. It's great as long as we're in hunter-gatherer times and all problems are solved through running, jumping, fighting, killing, rolling around. But now we add the fact that we're in the modern world, and that's not how we solve all of our problems. And so now we have to try to deal with all of this energy, all of this blood glucose, this blood sugar, right? Which changes our physiological expression. And when this happens, we don't realize it. And we just don't realize that's the case. Then we get off of work. We have no idea any of this is going on. And now it's like, well, I guess I'm supposed to relax now, but how do I don't know exactly how to do that. Your nervous system is still like, man, this is danger zone. How do I go to sleep? Well, you can't go to sleep because, man, we're still in that heightened state. And so what we teach people how to do, and this is how breathing actually infects that. So it's not, a lot of times a person looks at us as like this bag of chemicals, right? So we need to change the chemical makeup. And yes, that is something that happens. But what breath work does, it's interesting. So if you think about this, so everybody listening or watching, this whole time I've been talking, you've been breathing, I would assume. I would hope, right? So, research shows the longer you breathe, the longer you live. Please continue.
I've been on my edge, holding my breath.
Right. Yeah. That's. But it was automatic. But now that we're talking about it, where is your breath? Is it in your belly? Is it in your chest? Now, when you start to think about it, you can do it consciously. And it's the fact that we have this link between a conscious and an unconscious act that gives us the ability to use breathing to interface with all of these things that I just said. Because all of those things are governed by your autonomic nervous system. But guess what else is? Your breathing. And it's the one thing on that list of the autonomic nervous system that we have conscious control of, and we can just kick it back to the autonomic nervous system whenever we're asleep, whenever we're not thinking about it. So this has led us through an enormous amount of research. And of course, ancient cultures were experimenting with this for a long time. But since the 1800s, we've been using the scientific method to examine how does breathing influence blood sugar? How does breathing influence our digestion? And ultimately, it allows us to switch between these two states, that sympathetic side and that parasympathetic side. That parasympathetic side being the side where it's basically the opposite of action. Now your senses will dull. Hey, that's good. So you can get a good night's sleep. Now your digestion, all the organs responsible for digestion will turn back on and they're going to work appropriately. Well, we need that. If our ancestors didn't have the ability, I mean, just imagine if like, there's an $80 billion industry right now on antacids. That is the reality here in the United States. And we advertise it on television all the time. You got to buy, Prevacid, and you got to buy Pepto-Bismol. Imagine, do you really think our ancestors had that? If they couldn't sleep at night, if they couldn't digest their food, if they couldn't reproduce without that blue little pill or whatever, do you think we would be here? Of course not.
Well, that's the number one, right? That's the number one driver in biology. That's lesson one, right? Is reproduce. Every organism on the planet, their number one goal is reproduce. That's how you survive.
And you can't do that unless you're safe. And you can't do that unless your nervous system believes you're safe. And so what we do is we teach a person how to send those messages using breathing. Do I need to basically throttle it down? Am I going to need to throttle it up? How much activity do I need from my nervous system? Am I going to be really active? Can I throttle it back down when I need to? And so what we're doing with breathwork is we're saying we can't rely on our environment to inform our nervous system anymore. We have to take conscious actions that will say, okay, I'm always in this dangerous state every day. Do I constantly need to stay in the state of fight or flight? No, of course. I need to relax. I need to digest. I need to reproduce. I need to recover. You can't heal and run, and so what we're trying to help people do is be able to find more balance in between these states and take an active role. And once you do that, you can say, wow, my life is so much better. When I need to, I can hit the gas, and there's more gas because I've been able to replenish my supply because I was able to hit the brake whenever I needed to.
So let's roll that in real quick to the insulin resistance that we talked about in the beginning, right? Of why so many officers are insulin resistant. And we are asking our officers, the vast majority are working 12-hour shifts. So they're eating breakfast and lunch at work, or they're eating lunch or dinner. They're eating 2 meals normally at work. And Pat, right? I just got done with a crash, or I just got done on a stressful run or whatever. What are we going to do? Let's go grab a meal real quick. So we're still way up here and we're stuffing ourselves with food, whether it's good or not. And we don't have that ability to truly digest it. And we're not telling officers to change dramatically, right? We're telling them before you sit down and consume that meal, take 2 minutes, 2 minutes in your car, 2 minutes at the table. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to sit crisscross applesauce, right? Just sit for 2 minutes and do some simple breathing techniques. Bring that system down so you can digest that food. And we're not always, because that was my first step in fixing my insulin resistance. Was I don't need to be up here all the time. I need to digest this food and let my system actually use it for what it's for.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh man, I had like 5 thoughts right there that they all came into my head at once, and I'm just like, don't say anything, just wait. So if you were to, like, for the officer that's in the car and that's driving around, I don't think they truly appreciate the emotional state that their body goes into automatically. And I know Dr. Gilmartin talks about this a lot, right? So I'm going to give you just a specific example. I wear a Whoop strap. I wish I'd had one of these things 30 years ago. I used to wear a Fitbit, and I like Fitbit, so nothing against Fitbit if there's Fitbit fans on here. But so years ago, I went through a coaching program, and this is, one of the reasons why I'm such a huge fan of performance coaching, for a lot of different reasons. But I worked with a coach there who asked me, he saw my Fitbit and he was like, have you ever heard of Whoop? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, are you familiar with HRV? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, the problem is like, it's very difficult. It's kind of a pain in the ass to try to calculate that if you don't have the right wearable or the right device. But I was really interested in it. That program was the Zero to Dangerous program. It's Stephen Kotler's program. So you're basically learning how to go into flow states. And um, but I was telling him, I had an interaction with one of my officers who also wore a Fitbit, and he's like, hey Chief, he's like, this will probably you'll probably find this interesting, but he's like, I was following my data over a course of a few days, and he's like, I wasn't really busy I didn't have like any real serious like high adrenaline type calls, just basic police work for a couple days. And then I looked at that compared to my 2 days off because they were on 12-hour shifts, right? So 2 days, it was a 2 day on and then 2 day off. His resting heart rate at work was almost 30 beats higher than it was when he was on his days off. And so what I did then is I went in and he shared that with me. He shared his data for over a couple days. I went in and I pulled his CAD sheets. So if you're not familiar with that, Jesse, that's our computer aided dispatch. So that's where I can look and see what his calls for service were and what he did. And I looked at his 2 days worth of data, and I was like, holy crap, that was like, these things kind of when you read and you study it and you're like, yeah, I know this is what's happening. But then to actually see the numbers and how high it was in relationship to just like go into a traffic accident, yeah. And I think he went to a couple domestics, but he's like, but they weren't like no fights, no arrest, any type of thing, but just that emotional uh, reaction and response to being there. It was unbelievable to me. And that's where immediately I was like, so when that coach told me, he's like, you have to think about that. I was like, I literally called that day and ordered a Whoop, and I have not gone back. I like Aura. I think Aura is a good tool as well. But for cops, um, that's kind of, and I'm not sponsored by Whoop. Maybe I should be. Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, that's really just kind of a long way of saying what I think, Jared. Like that's a great point. And of course, we want people to make the right food choices. We want them to make, and I think maybe the overall lesson in this is you got to have balance across the board. And when you get into states of imbalance, then that's when the negative hormonal cascade begins. And then if you don't recover, then that's going to tend to get worse. So you're going to get things like inflammation that start to build and others.
Yeah, we do a phenomenal job of teaching situational awareness, right? What is going on around us can affect everything we do. We do not teach internal awareness. And Jesse says, right, awareness is the first step to all positive change. Well, you're never going to, and that's what I keep harping on is we are looking for that anomaly out there. We're looking for the threat, but we're not looking internal to our internal threat. So why?
Which may be the biggest threat of all, is our own imagination.
Exactly. Yeah. Why is my heart rate rising right now? Did I smell something? Right? Because that leads directly into your situational awareness. Why do I feel this way right now? But if we never know that, if we never even get to the point of being able to realize, I think I wear, a fitness watch. Everybody should have something that's detecting their heart rate. Every officer, I think everybody in the world should too. But
yeah, Apple Watches are great for that too.
Yeah, and just know, right, of where am I right now? Because sometimes there's times, listen, people walk into my office, my heart rate's up in the hundreds and I don't even know it. But the more you become aware, the more then you just instinctively know I'm amped up and I need to know why. And if I am, how do I bring myself right back down?
Yeah, so I'm going to go backwards in time a little bit, and like this is I was familiar with Mark Divine's work really early on. Maybe you guys are familiar with I came across him from US CrossFit early in the CrossFit days, but he's a retired SEAL commander, and he's written multiple books. But he was really the first person that I ever talked about that I really heard talk a lot about meditation and breath work, and he brought this to the SEAL community, 25 years ago. And I don't know, I'm not crediting him for it. I just know that he's the one that I learned it from, and he talked very publicly about it. But learning box breathing from him, and it kind of it there was I used to run a lot when like early in my early days in the police world. Uh, I used to run every morning. I worked midnight shifts for years, and that was kind of my routine right before marriage and before kids. Was I get off work in the morning, I would go run 5, 8, 10 miles. I would go home, eat breakfast, go to bed, wake up. In the evening, I would lift weights, and that was kind of nice. But as I progressed through my career, one of the things that I found when I ran, right, it was the first 5 to 10 minutes of running, and this running became, I was not a runner when I was younger. It became almost like something that I had to do, but I didn't really understand the why. But I just felt like if I go 2 or 3 days without running, I don't feel very good. And what I also discovered was that when I ran, if I could get through that first 5 to 10 minutes, I would get into these flow states, like, or they call it the runner's high, right? Where you would, I could literally run for miles, and then you'd realize like, oh, I'm out running. And in reading, like, how am I breathing? If you're a mouth breather when you're running, you're not going to run very far, right? So learning how to breathe, what I just kind of discovered by accident was, when I really take these controlled breaths, when I find the right pace where I can continue to breathe through my nose, exhale out my mouth, when I can get that good rhythm going, like everything, the whole world, colors get a little bit brighter. The ideas and the thoughts and the things that come in, I mean, all like problems I hadn't thought about in 3 weeks, suddenly like a solution pops into my head, like, oh, yeah, that's what I should do there, or that's what I was trying to. So yeah, I mean, that's a long babbled way of saying breathing is important, and how you get there. What you guys are teaching, I think, and especially if we can get this into younger officers' hands, man, what a keys to the kingdom, opening up at a very young age, and then literally changing the trajectory of so many different things. And then not just from a health and wellness perspective, right? But all those things lead into personal well-being, job satisfaction, happiness in your personal life, and most likely greater success in your professional life.
100%. Knowing first and foremost how you work. How does this thing that I am, how does this work, right? You get a car, you get a new device or something like that. First thing you do is you look, okay, what are the instructions? How does all this stuff work? We don't come with one of those. We might take biology class and all these other things, but oftentimes we miss how does this thing work? And a lot of times we treat ourselves like we're some kind of a machine with an on and off switch, and we're not. We are an organism that you never turn off. I mean, I guess you turn on one day, and then eventually someday, you'll turn off. But between that first and last breath, you're always on, even when you're asleep. There's a reason why an alarm clock works. There's unconscious parts of you that are looking for threats even then. And so what we do is we train people how to work with that nervous system. And about a year and a half ago, we started working in the Indianapolis Metro Police Academy. So actually, I'm really proud of the progress we've been able to make with a younger generation. And, we've so everyone that goes through there, and we're trying to spread this, to other places as well. So if you're listening, we'd love to bring this program to you. We developed a curriculum that covers the main things that a person needs to know. And it's more than just, breathe in for this long and hold for this long. We want a person to understand the way you breathe. So literally the breath that you're taking right now is sending a message to that nervous system. It is either sending a message of, okay, a little bit of stress, maybe a lot of bit of stress, or, hey, okay, I'm calm, relaxed, confident. There's been research done on multiple aspects of how this works. And even just there's research done on secretaries. So they showed all these secretaries in this one study. It was quite a few years back, and they all had dysfunctional breathing patterns. So just like you would have a dysfunctional movement pattern, 80% of the public has a dysfunctional breathing pattern, according to most research. 90% of college athletes have a dysfunctional breathing pattern. And these are the young people that are in the best shape. So it's very common to have a dysfunctional breathing pattern. But what they showed is these secretaries, they just sitting there, they were breathing dysfunctionally, and they had the same basic stress hormonal profile in their blood as a person who is doing high intensity interval training. So
Wow.
a person comes home from work, and this is the classic thing we hear from just a person that has a desk job. I have every intention to exercise when I get home, but I'm just exhausted, right? Well, your nervous system has been it's been thinking you're running away from a bear all day, and you don't realize it. And what you don't know can hurt you. So what we try to do is say, okay, let's learn how to take a breath again. So most people forget how to take a proper breath about the age of 3. And if you have a kid about the age of 2 or 3, you've noticed at that point they can still do a perfect squat. So parents, it's amazing. They can sit there, play with their toys, doing a perfect squat, and then a few years later, they can't seem to do that anymore. And it takes a while to relearn that. Now I show off whenever I'm like, hey, look at this. I can do a berg squat. It's the same with our breathing patterns. And so we're sending our kids to school with dysfunctional breathing patterns. They wonder why they have a hard time focusing, sitting still, all these things. But it's because unknowingly we're sending stress signals using our breathing. Even if we're not in a stressful situation, you can stress sleep. And this happens very commonly. A lot of times we'll talk about how the difference between just simply changing from mouth breathing to nasal breathing can affect the way your nervous system interprets those signals. So it's something that you're always doing anyway. So so everyone hearing this right now, you are currently sending a stress signal or a relaxation signal with your breathing. Typically, we see a lot of people with dysfunctional breathing, and simply reteaching a person how to take a functional breath can do an enormous amount of good. And even when it comes to policing, I believe it was a 40% improvement in accuracy in firearms shooting. So just simply having functional breath, because it makes a big difference. And this is also something I think most people can relate to after exercise. So a lot of people, and this is how I started in breath training. I would train MMA fighters. So the classic, you get done with the gym, and what do? You do your protein shake, and then everyone talks about having protein farts. And if I hate to bring this up on your podcast and sully this podcast by talking about farts, but it's true, right? We all understand that the protein, what that is. And the reality is we attribute it to the protein, but in reality, research shows that a person leaving the gym for up to 4 hours after leaving the gym is still in a sympathetic dominant state, right? So that's a catabolic state. That's the state where you really don't have a lot of digestive function. And everyone thinks, well, I better do my protein shake so I can start recovery. Well, you haven't even stopped the nervous system hasn't even stopped the workout unless you do some kind of a mitigation. So when I started working with athletes, we started to change this, and just that 4-hour difference each day was a huge game changer for your overall gains, for your overall progress. So when we train,
improve recovery.
100%. So when we train officers in this, wow, okay, so you're going to go home, you want to show up for your family, you want to have dinner, you want to enjoy the life that you have, that you've worked so hard, you risk your life every day. And so you deserve to go home and enjoy your family and enjoy the life and that you have, and sleep well. Okay, that's not as hard as it might seem. We just got to work on some protocols. And so we introduce some protocols on how to say, okay, nervous system, I'm leaving the dangerous place now. I'm going to my safe place, because you can't count on the nervous system to pick that up anymore. There's so many, as you said, we have all the different things on our cell phones. There's so many dangerous signals, and there's so many things we might be ruminating from the day that we just had. Sometimes it's hard to leave work at work, especially if you've seen some crazy stuff that day. So what we try to do, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
you got to with me.
We keep talking about like a dysfunctional breathing pattern. So when I picked up your book, and for those that are listening, we talked about this a little bit before we jumped on air. I skipped the first part of the book and went right to chapter 12 and to understand what are the breathing techniques, because I've done a few. Wim Hof teaches some. I've done some of the ones that he does, and briefly, just one of the things about cold plunging and is where I think people are looking at the temperature and how that impacts the body and the physiology. But what oftentimes, if you've ever jumped into a cold shower or a cold pool real quick, what's the one thing you do that you can't control? It's your breathing. Right. Like when you go, you like that. So there is that a bit of a stress response, and just learning how to manage that from a plunge perspective. But anyway, you walk people through in the book on how to do this. And I was looking forward to getting on to this call so I could, because I was like laying on my floor in my office here, trying to figure out, like, okay, are my breathing pattern good? Are they right? So maybe take a minute and just walk through how can someone understand real quick whether they have a functional or dysfunctional breathing pattern.
Sure. So one of the things we want to think about, we call it the breath wave. So the reason why we call a functional breath a breath wave is because in some ways it will resemble a wave if you're lying down. And the reason, first of all, we know how a breath should look, because it's literally how, with very, very few exceptions, we're all born. So we're all born with functional breathing, and it's just something that we tend to have issues, later on. A functional breath does two things. It will give you the best overall gas exchange. So it's going to give you the best possible uptake of oxygen, the best possible release of CO2. There's other gases, but those are our primary two. So it does that. And a functional breath will do another thing, and that is tell the nervous system what's going on. And so let's cover both of these. So a functional breath typically is going to start in the lower part of our in our abdomen. We're using our diaphragm, and a lot of people, well, I've heard of the diaphragm. It's interesting with the diaphragm. It's very difficult to feel the diaphragm. Like, there's only 7 muscle spindles in the diaphragm. So we have like hundreds and thousands in all of our other muscles, which lets us feel, am I flexing that muscle? Well, I've got a lot of muscle spindles that will give me that feedback. It's difficult with the diaphragm. So what we have to do is we sort of have to visualize something. And so there's a few different ways you can do this, but the way that tends to work the best is if you find your belly button and you measure about 2 finger lengths underneath the belly button. And then imagine from that space, from that place, you're going to put a marble in the very center of your abdomen from that point. So between the front of your tummy and your low back. And with every inhale, what you're going to try to do is, it's almost as if that marble is a balloon, and it's going to expand in every direction into about the size of a softball. That is what it should feel like to take a proper breath. Now, what's actually happening is the diaphragm is descending, and it's basically squishing your guts. That feeling is what happens whenever the diaphragm comes down. It puts pressure on your liver, your stomach, and your intestines, and you're going to notice that the belly is going to expand. It'll expand in the front, on the sides, even in the low back, you're going to feel expansion. What that does, the reason why it's so important to start the breath there is, again, for those 2 reasons. One, that is going to expand the lower lobes of your lungs. That's where the vast majority of oxygen consumption can take place, that gas exchange. and there's more alveoli there. The blood flow is more rich there. The absorption is almost 100% in that lower part. And there's just so much more potential for that gas exchange to happen there, more than any other place in your lungs. The other thing is that your nervous system expects it to come from that place. And whenever you give your nervous system something that it doesn't expect, it sees that as possible danger. And so it's going to be doing those two things at the same time when you pull it down in that lower part of the breath wave. The second part of your breath wave, once you've expanded as much in that lower part as you can, you're going to expand your ribs. So your ribs will expand outward. We're trying to really, really just go as far out as we can. We're going to stretch the lungs, in this case, out. This expands the lungs, and it improves, again, how much air can come into those lungs. The other thing is your nervous system expects that to be the second place in the breath wave. And so it says, okay, we're in control, we're safe, we're cool. The last place is the upper part of your lungs. That's where our chest is. Now, we have multiple muscles that will expand that area, but that's the smallest part of your lungs, and it's the part of your lungs that actually has the least amount of gas exchange. And so often a person, when they take a deep breath, they'll just expand their chest. And yes, they feel their muscles. Again, this is because of muscle spindles are in their chest and their shoulders and their upper back. They may, man, I took a big, deep gulp of a breath. Wow. But in reality, you only filled the smallest part of your lungs whenever you just do the chest. Up in the chest, that's the last part that the nervous system expects. And if you think about how you breathe when you're fighting or whenever you're running and jumping, it's going to be those big breaths that use the chest. Your nervous system says, well, we must be in a highly active state if we're doing that. So what happens oftentimes with dysfunction, the two most common things we see is that a person is using their mouth instead of their nose to breathe, and as a result, they're using the chest muscles at the exclusion of the two earliest parts of the breath wave, those two bottom parts of the breath wave that reassure the nervous system that you're safe and that allow for the better gas exchange. So at first, when we train individuals and when we do this with our seminars, workshops, the breathwork tactics, the curriculum we have for first responders in all different areas, we teach people not only how to do a proper breath, but we also like to teach them how to check each other's breath waves out, to hold each other accountable, but also just so it's like, hey, am I doing this right? And like I say in the book, it's important to not try to do it with a mirror, to try to do it, have someone else look at you so you can start, rather than having that instant feedback, so that you can start to just feel it and the other person can tell, okay, yeah, you're doing it right here. We often see dysfunctional breathing is actually strangely easy once you're aware of it, and once you can say, okay, I just need to, it feels a little weird to do a functional breath, but I'm going to do this right. We see that people within a couple weeks can usually, if they do daily 10 to 20 minutes a day, checking in with their breathing, they can usually start to see a huge change. And it's just very natural to breathe a functional breath. And before you know it, it's weird to breathe the way, in a dysfunctional way. And so when we combine that with, we take thousands of breaths, we're constantly breathing, and you're constantly sending a signal that's appropriate now. Okay. So the nervous system is getting that reassurance constantly with every breath you take, and you're getting a better gas exchange. So you're getting a more efficient breath. You see just that foundational aspect of how you take each breath, you're seeing better nervous system regulation, and you're seeing better overall performance physically because you're allowing yourself to get more oxygen in every breath.
So how is that? I mean, maybe Jared, for you, but like, what has been your experience watching police officers go through this training? What kind of it? Obviously, if they're there, well, if you're doing it at the academy level, they don't really have a choice, right? They're going to be there. For those that are choosing to come to these kind of seminars, I mean, they understand that, hey, this is something I think is going to help me. So what have you guys maybe give me a few examples of, like, what your experiences have been teaching first responders.
Yeah. So at first they, just like anything, they're a little skeptical when they first walk in the door. By the time that we get done, the majority of them have said, I have never felt like this before, because and those are the 5+ year officers, right? They have been on the job for so long, and it's like dog years in law enforcement, right? But you've been on the job for so long, you don't remember what it was like when you were 16, 17, 20, whatever, the last time you actually had a parasympathetic state of mind where you are completely relaxed. And it's just really mind-blowing. And as we go into some of the deeper, like we'll talk about in a little bit, the retreat, where they get to do this for days on end, now they've been able to dip into that on for days. And they're just, you see a different person from the person that shows up to the person that leaves. It's completely different. It's almost like you're seeing them on vacation after, because you know how it is. You go on vacation, the first couple of days are not vacation. I mean, you really have got to be on vacation for a week to get 2 or 3 days out of that, to finally come down. And so we see that within days of us actually doing this. But yeah, on the one-on-ones, we see a lot of it. We see a lot of breathing dysfunction. I'll go back to what Jesse was talking about, the proper breath wave. When you got a gun belt on, when you've got a vest on, it restricts every part of your body. And so for those of you listening, right, it's breathing in your belly. It's actually pushing your belly out, which is, again, it's just counterintuitive to what we as officers think. We're always big and have our chests up, right, and we're ready. Our hands are up, and we're breathing in our shoulders instead of our belly, because normally it's easier because we're so restricted everywhere else.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point too. The external vest carriers versus an internal vest, because where are the straps for your vest? They're generally on your belly. Like, you got those two big straps. So when you're putting your vest on and you're sucking in your belly and you're tightening those things up, now they're elastic, so there is a little bit of give to them. But a new vest, it's tight in a lot of ways, and
Right.
and so that might be another good argument, other than just some of the practical uses for an external vest carrier. Maybe we can talk about that another time, but
yeah, I love to see the officers, right? They have those outer vest carriers, and they're sitting at the office doing paperwork, and they pop them open.
Yep.
Because it gives them that freedom to relax and breathe properly.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of we went through that research years and years ago, but I won't go down that road today. But I will to this point, like, and there's a lot of reluctance even from some of your traditionalists out there to wear external vest carriers, and outside in the community, sometimes people, oh, it's very militaristic, it looks militaristic, and we went to them. We've been wearing those things at our agency almost 15 years now. There was not a lot of people doing it when we did it, but I did research when I was on our uniform committee back in the late 90s, where I was worried about leather belts. I was worried about the tightness and the damage it was doing to hips. But the other thing is as we keep piling on responsibility, so we can look at this in two ways, right? Maybe use it as a metaphor, but there's a lot of weight that you're carrying, and you're carrying it on your hips. But then every one of those tools also has a job, which has a little bit of weight to it as well, like the decision process of what to use, when to use it. And over time, like, you're just carrying that with you all the time, and you're cycling through these things. So maybe Jesse, like, we were joking a little online too about AOSEP. Like, I like anytime I read someone starts talking about AOSEP's fables. But you made an analogy on the fox and the cat, right? And for those that haven't read it, or if you've never read it, pick it up, read them to your kids, read them to yourself. But the story of the fox and the cat is really right. Like a fox and a cat get into this conversation, and it's, the fox thinks he's really clever and really smart because when the hunters come, he says, I can think of 1,000 ways where I can get away from the dogs, where the cat can only think of one. And then they hear the dogs, the cat runs up the tree and hides, where now the fox is standing there going through, what do I do next? I've got all these potential things that I could do. I'm so smart. And so I was thinking of that when you were talking about fight, flight, or freeze, right? Sometimes when you have too many options and too many choices, the default becomes don't do anything at all because we get stuck. And for officers, and maybe for someone that's out there that's been reluctant to make some of these changes away from a traditional police uniform, from the shiny leather belt to a more flexible nylon belt, to maybe even a drop holster, for to move the gun off of the hip and onto the upper thigh, the external vest carrier that now redistributes all of the weight from that gear across your entire frame and not just hanging it all on your waist, but it also gives you room to breathe, and it allows for expansion. So, and from the militaristic argument there, like if you don't want cops to look militaristic, then don't ask them to do everything to solve every societal problem. But if you're going to ask them to have a solution to all these potential problems, then they have to have the tools to be able to do it. The most important tool that they have, and the whole purpose of this show, right, is to be able to focus on that 6 inches between the ears, right? It's our brain, and it's us as people that bring that, that make really the worst successful or not successful. So yeah, I mean, again, another little tangent, but I think that's so important for people. It's not just what we're carrying, but why we're carrying it, and it's not just what we're teaching, but why are we teaching it? And then getting right down into the root of everything. Every breath, every single breath makes a difference. And like I literally was just in this conversation yesterday with a retiring chief, and sometimes as chiefs, or really as cops in general, you don't think about what's next until it's here. And we are like, oh, well, now that I'm retired, yeah, I can use this as an opportunity to get healthy and, to lose that weight, the stuff that I just haven't had time to do. And where, yeah, and one of the things that over the years, for all the, for the thousands of people I've coached, it's like, it really, you can't ruminate, right, too much on what got you where you are. You just have to accept where you are in this moment, think about where you're trying to go, and then what's your next decision. Because every decision, like from a nutrition perspective, how do you want to feel for the next 3 to 4 hours? Well, what you put in your mouth right now is going to determine that. And in a couple hours, you're going to, or if you put the wrong thing in your mouth, you're going to be eating again in an hour. Uh, if you put the right thing, it's 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours. And then when you make that decision again, you make another good, now we're building. Now we're going to kind of build momentum. But, what I really love about what you guys are teaching is, in this breath, we've got the choice to learn how to breathe and to teach ourselves how to do it and how to do it the right way. And just from a meditation perspective, one of the scary things, and this is why I think cops sometimes are, and not just cops, but others in general, sometimes are scared to try to meditate, because ask somebody to sit in a room, is even whether you're by yourself or with others, and to do nothing but sit with your own thoughts for the next 10 to 20 minutes. And one of the most challenging things about learning to meditate is also learning to give yourself a little bit of grace, that your mind is going to wander. You're going to go off you're going to be going down places, and that's okay. It's just learning to catch yourself when you're going down those paths. And this is another area where, like, one of the apps that I use a couple different apps. I use Amuse. I use Calm sometimes. There's a few others, but uh, going when you're actually going through a breath meditation, when you have someone that's something a timer that's helping you, where you're really just focusing on your breathing, and when you can really learn to focus on the breath and what you're doing with each breath, where how to feel it, how to sense it, it's amazing. A lot of the other thoughts go away, right? And then when your mind starts to wander and you start thinking, oh my gosh, like when I started with my meditation chair, I started coming home for lunch, and before I would leave the house to go back to my office, I would sit in that chair. And I started with 5 minutes. With 5 minutes, I'm just going to sit here. And eventually I worked my way to 20 minutes and then I worked my way into a couple other sessions at different times of the day. But it's amazing when you find yourself in a good breathing pattern and you can stay there. And when the mind doesn't wander, I think that's the sensation maybe that the officers in your seminars they've been given permission, and they've given themselves permission to actually go to that place and be like, wow, this is what it's like. It's been
Right.
so long since I've been here, but
It's
it's
not
always
talk
been there.
therapy, right?
Right.
It's not meditation is hard when you, just like you said, I don't want to think about the things that I've tried to forget. Um, but it is easy for me to sit and count, because now if I stop focusing on the number of my breath, now I'm no longer in breath meditation. So this then can lead into, now I can sit with my thoughts. Before I could not. And so it just, because you're always counting, you're listening to somebody else count, or you're counting in your head. And so it's a great first step into getting into that. And before we wrap up, I think, for everybody listening, de-escalation has been the buzzword for years. And I think of breath just like when you're on the airplane and they're talking about the oxygen masks, right?
Right.
You've got to de-escalate yourself. And I apologize for anyone that gets offended, right? But we get ramped up, and as an officer, you got to de-escalate you first, and then de-escalate the situation. And you do that through breath. You do that through, I'm just gonna, on my way to that run, or when the person does whatever the person does to me to take me from 0 to 100, I'm just gonna take a sec, right? There are times, and we all know, I'm not saying this is life or death. Do I pull my gun? Do I not? I'm talking the person that, pulls out their camera, that says all those wonderful, nice words to you. I can breathe and you don't even know it. I can be actively de-escalating myself and you have no idea what I'm doing. And then I can actively use that same technique to de-escalate the situation that I'm in.
Lead yourself first, man.
That's right.
And you know that you should never apologize for that, because hopefully you've had a good field training officer, and hopefully you've had a good frontline supervisor, a good sergeant that knows immediately, because it's every officer learns it before they realize that they've learned it, that they're they may call it a sixth sense or the officer's intuition. All it is a trained response into their mind. You can hear when your partners are stressed and when they're not. You know the difference just by the way they talk. You know immediately that they're ramping up. So a good supervisor that is paying attention is going to immediately begin to pay attention to the calls where they hear their officers. And we all know that there's some officers that go from 0 to 100, and then they can't bring themselves back down. And I'll make one, and I call it the doom loop, right? I've called it that for years. It's like officers get sucked into the doom loop, and what they need is a cue to pull them out of it. And if you have to learn how to do it yourself first, and we all learn these lessons the hard way, right? When you say something, immediately you're like, shouldn't have said that. Or you do something, shouldn't have done that. Um, it helps to also know that your partners around you can give you a cue that's also going to pull you out. And I'll give you this example. Like I remember one time I was driving around part of our city. I could smell smoke somewhere. Like I knew something was on fire. I just couldn't find it. Like for 2 hours, I'm driving around like between traffic stops and calls. I'm like, and then sure enough, get a call, 911 call comes in, house is on fire. A neighbor had seen, this house on fire. So I, this is early in my career where I have been out on solo patrol only for a few months. And I'm kind of excited, right? Because yeah, I've confirmed my intuition. I zoom up to this house, I jump up, I can see the flames inside. The house is filled with smoke, and I start pounding on the door, and uh, nobody's coming to the door. And so I get on the radio. I'm like, yeah, the house is on fire. The house fully, whatever, fully engulfed. Can I kick in the door? I'm asking permission if I can kick in the door. And my sergeant at the time, just as calm as could be, yeah, go ahead and kick in the door if you need to. And then boom, I kick in the door. Of course, one of my partners is in the back, and he says when I kick in the door, the whole back side of the house, like flames just go flying out the door up into the air. And then, I got a lecture from a fireman later, like, that was probably not a good idea what you did. But, anyway, it was one of those things. If you're wondering, yeah, we tried to get into the house, but it was the smoke was already down to the floor level. I mean, I couldn't even get 10, 15 feet in there. And so we had to pull back out. But nobody was in there, thankfully. But a couple hours later, some of the other guys were giving me shit. Like, can I kick in the door? Can I kick in the door? Like, what are you asking permission for? And that was the military mind to me. I was, being, having been in the military, like, there are certain things that like, shit, we weren't, when I was working, like there were times where you weren't even allowed to chamber a round in your gun. Like, and it's like that, there, I could tell a lot of stories like that, but good example of what happens, right? Under stress,
Right.
under pressure. But kudos to my supervisor. And in the moment, you don't recognize that until later. You start picking up on these things. Like he immediately realized he recognized in me like that I was amped up, and
Sure.
using that calm voice just bring me right back down. And so when you look at cases like what happened up in with Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, and you see it in these cases over and over again. And to another case, another point of yours, Jared, like body cameras, it's such a, that's why body cameras are such a great tool, because sometimes we don't realize how amped up we are. Whether I've got an HR, I'm tracking my HRV and my heart rate, like I might at the end of a shift look and go, oh man, that was way up there. You can do the same thing with body camera footage. A good experienced supervisor that understands when somebody is, in a, whether they're in a sympathetic or parasympathetic state, ask the right questions. Like, hey, tell me what you were thinking at this point right here. What was going through your mind? And most likely the officer's not going to remember. And they're watching the video, and now they're really, it's like they're watching somebody else, and then remembering what they were going through. And you could say, hey, look, here would have been a perfect example. That the last 30 seconds as you're driving in, you know where you're going, you're thinking about what you're going to do, but as you're doing that, take a good four count breath in,
Yeah.
hold for 4, press it out for 4, do that a couple cycles before you get out of your car, and now you're in a prepared and ready state.
And this is something we do in our trainings, both with the academy and of course in our retreats. We put people through stressful situations that are not, we're not going to make you go into a burning house or you be under fire, but we put people under stressful situations, one of which is the ice bath. I know we're almost done with the podcast. I hate to get through the entire podcast without mentioning, hey, we'll throw you into a whole bunch of ice water. But one of the things that an ice bath will do. Of course, people do it for a lot of reasons, recovery, health, and things like that. But we use it primarily because we know that that is your hypothalamus is going to pick that up. So your brain picks that up as a life or death, which it is if you were to stay in it long enough. It doesn't understand that you're going to get out in a few minutes. But so we get to use this stimulus and we say, okay, we've taught you these techniques. Now we're going to put you in a situation, you're going to learn how to apply it. And we do a lot of different variations on that in our retreat. But at the police academy, we always have people, okay, now recite the credo or the mission statement. And, they first they get in there, they can't really say anything. And okay, now let's go through these protocols that we've learned. All right. So you're going to breathe functionally. We're going to do, okay, remember the techniques we learned, run through your protocols. How are you going to down regulate now? Okay. As they start changing up their breathing, the breathing pattern changes. Next thing you know, I will do this, you'll start hearing, and before you know it, everybody's able to say it. And what we like to help a person see is, okay, so we're not just going to give you this stuff and it's this, boy, wouldn't it be great, or this flighty stuff where it's like, ooh, it's, you just think happy thoughts and things. This is not what that is, right? This is a completely different thing. This is literally, we're going to teach you how to interact with your nervous system in a very purposeful way that you can rely on. And we're going to put you in an ice bath because we're not going to shoot at you, at the retreat, but we're going to put you in an ice bath. We know the neurochemicals in your brain, all the sympathetic state, all these things are going to be heightened state of fight or flight. And we're going to allow you to demonstrate to yourself the effectiveness of what we just taught you. So,
I love it.
Yeah. So it's a program that we're really proud of. I want to thank Jared, because if not for Jared's really thoughtfulness, the fact that he read my book, and by the way, for everyone listening, it's okay to skip to chapter 13. I wrote the book so that you could. You can. The idea of the book is, if you don't really want to read my story or the history of work or all these other things, you can just skip right to the meat and start practicing breath work on your own. But the idea is, and this is what I'm so thankful that Jared reached out, and the idea is, listen, we have a group of people that we rely on. Our whole society is so indebted to the fact that people put their lives on the line every single day for us. And it's something that we can use, something that we understand through science. And we know this is not just wishful thinking. And one of the officers that I trained actually in our first retreat that we did for the Breathwork Tactics retreat said, this is the tool that I know I won't forget in my squad car. You just can't, right? It's literally, you take it with you wherever you go. You can't forget it in your squad car. It's not going to misfire, or you don't have to buy any new pieces of equipment. It literally is with you all the time. And it's something you can rely on. And the more you practice it, and the more you train yourself with the tools and the techniques that we offer, the better it works. And so we just want to invite everybody to, if you want to reach out to us, if you're interested in this kind of training, this is, we call it Breathwork Tactics. It is straight to the point. We don't make you do, there's no yoga, there's no singing, there's no, this is directly to your nervous system and how you can use your breathing, which is something you're using anyway, like you mentioned before, Patrick. In the Casper van der Meulen, the author of the foreword of my first book, of that book, every single breath is doing this anyway. And so when you learn how it works and you learn how to work with it, you upgrade how every other tool you have works as well, because you're the operator.
Right on. Jared, any parting words?
I just think, again, I thank Jesse for the work he's done. I thank you for all you have really, for Indiana, pioneered a lot of just for me and others, of saying, you know what, we need to get healthy, we need to do better. And so I thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do. For all of those listening, if first and foremost, as a chief, if you're a chief, it starts with you. It starts with leadership. It starts with, even if you're not the chief, right? If you're a supervisor, if you're cap, wherever you're at in the organization, it starts with the leaders showing the way. Again, we're not trying to make you vulnerable. We're trying to make you better. So in a world of increasing healthcare costs, increasing work comp claims, I know budgets are tight, but this is a way, this is a tool, right? That we don't have to update every 5 years. We don't have to buy a new one. We teach you, you have it, and it's with you forever. It is the best return on investment that you're going to find right now. So I would strongly suggest that you look into it. We offer train the trainer programs. We offer just couple hour classes that will come to your police department and teach, or the retreat. The retreat's the best because just like anything else, I can send you to the range for a day, or I can send you to SWAT school. You're going to come back a better tactical officer from coming to SWAT school, right? Than the couple hours at the range. And that's what we're trying to do, is make you proficient in these things. So this is the first step, and it's impactful. It's powerful. We all don't like to talk about the trauma that we carry, but we have it. There's not an officer out there, unless it's maybe day one, hour one, that has not been exposed to post-traumatic stress. Breathwork is a way, again, that can be proven that you can release some of that trauma without re-experiencing the trauma. So lots of just great things. Please reach out if you're interested, and let's connect and get together.
How do they where can they find you? Where can people find you?
You can go to breathworktactics.com and click on contact us. You can also you can just simply email me at Jesse, that's Jesse, at jessecoomer.com. That's COOMER. And you can reach out in that way. Our annual retreat is actually coming up, and the 2024 retreat here we're having it it's in a place called Plymouth, Indiana, a retreat center. It's for first responders only. And this is where we're going to do deep dives in breath. And we're going to be doing a lot of taking metrics to see where you are, how we can put you into the optimal state. And we'll be having all kinds of fun, like ice bathing, sauna, high intensity interval training, a lot of these mechanisms that we can build a better daily overall routine. We'll have protocols for you. That is April 26th, 27th, and 28th of this year. And so we'd invite anybody who's interested to reach out. Again, breathworktactics.com, or you can email me at jesse@jessecoomer.com.
Right on. Okay. Well, my closing thought here is I like train the trainer programs when you have to use them, but I prefer to drink right from the source whenever possible. And look, the challenge is, right, budgets are tight. We all know that. It's hard sometimes for all the training out there. Everything is important. And when you're trying to prioritize what to do, how to pay for it, train-to-trainer programs do come up. And I'm not saying not to do that, but what I would tell you is go to the retreat. Learn, drink from the fire hose, straight from the fire hose, from the people that know. Because in train-to-trainer, oftentimes we things get lost in translation. It's not to say that they're not effective, but I say go to the seminar first, and then go through the train-to-trainer program. And then be a practitioner yourself for a while. And the whole point of this podcast, cop optimization, really, it really starts with every single breath. So I want to thank you guys for spending some of your valuable time with us. And very, very cool. We're going to have to do this again. I'm already thinking, because 90 minutes is just not enough time. There's so much more. Grab a practical guide to breathwork, a remedy for the modern human condition. It's a great book. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to get to read a little bit about AOSEP as well. So
that's right.
All right, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.